Good morning. I appear to have drawn the first slot this morning, so I hope I live up to expectations, and it does feel a little odd to start with to be talking about the future before we've spoken about anything else, but hopefully it will be an interesting conversation to start the day. I'm Ronan, and I joined Wilko last December to head up resourcing. I was lucky enough to inherit a proactive and responsive team who were absolutely ready to embrace direct sourcing as a way of taking Wilko recruitment forward and spreading the word about what a great place Wilko is to work. I'm greatly indebted this morning to Mike Hoffman from SMRS, where I used to work, who supported me with some fantastic insight for this presentation, so I made sure that I give him a name check. And please go and see SMRS in the break. They've got some great stuff around STEM research that they've done with regard to graduate recruitment, and I think that would be a fantastic use of time. I'm going to ask a lot of questions this morning in my presentation. I hope that's okay. Hopefully there will be lots to discuss with everyone at your table, as I certainly don't know the answers. So a little bit about Wilko. J.K. Wilkinson opened his first hardware store in Leicester in 1930, and the business is still privately owned. Lisa Wilkinson and her father are the main shareholders. We now have almost 400 stores in the UK and are opening 50 more in the next couple of years. We currently sell 57,000 different products in our stores, and we also sell our stuff online, if you fancy joining in, at wilko.com. We have 21,500 team members, and they work in our stores, at head office, our service and distribution centres, and Wilko Asia. Our sourcing offices in Wilko Asia in Hong Kong and India, and we have our own Wilko branded products developed at Winnovate, which is part of the Wilko group, which our customers love, and I have to say I'm a massive convert. There's a lot of CSR work in Wilko's, and part of the heritage from J.K. Wilkinson was about being part of the community. Last year we raised $1,090,000 for our nominated charities, which we thought was pretty impressive, and $133,000 from the sale of our carrier bags, which was also donated to our charities. So the feel of the business is still very much rooted in the community and what we can do to support our customers and our team members. In truth, there are probably very few new ideas under the sun when it comes to marketing or recruitment. But the tech revolution and the application of big data is making some of the things that recruiters have maybe dreamed of a step closer to reality. But in the rush to think perhaps that, I don't know, the next big thing might be a recruiter app, should we nonetheless be keeping our feet on the ground? It's safe to say that if we were even to develop a method of ESP for sourcing, we'd still need to focus on the old-fashioned things that we do very well. Judging people to be good matches, providing timely and relevant information, and using the right messages to persuade a candidate to act. How are things changing? We know that the growth of technology into more areas of our lives, whether we like it or not, will continue unabated. And the data it generates will allow more possibilities for sourcing and matching candidates, as both candidates and employers have ever greater chances to find out more about each other much earlier in the process. But if we tease apart the threads of this constant innovation, what might be coming over the hill? There may be three key future-facing concepts that may well impact on the whole recruitment industry. Every week, it seems that there's a new app for an online service launched that threatens to become the Uber of the recruitment world, conveniently ignoring a lot of the skill that goes into the recruiter's trade. But it would be equally foolish to ignore the profound impact that disruption apps have had upon the way we make buying decisions, and we mustn't assume recruitment is immune from this. These apps follow the usual trajectory of other technologies. First, we use them for simple, low-level transactions until they have gained the necessary trust to be used for bigger ticket purchases. If we look at apps such as TaskRabbit, Rated People, and Upwork, they all use elementary vetting to provide a short list of people to provide a simple service on a just-in-time basis. Because the task is a low-risk purchase and has a basic guarantee of service level, plus the additional sanction of a bad review to punish poor service, it has been used increasingly to bring speed of access to everyday services. It's not too big a stretch, perhaps, to see how this might easily be built for the temporary or volume recruitment market. If you need a temp to provide some standard tasks, or maybe a receptionist for a day to cover sickness, why shouldn't an Uber-like app allow you to do this? Such arms and legs recruitment, as it's sometimes called, is perfect for an app to do the job. The trust required and the risk is relatively low. And the convenience is good, plus the threat of a bad rating outweighs the hassle and lost time briefing an agency. Admittedly, we're still a long way from the point where we would trust this sort of app-based approach for full-time or more complex recruitment. At the moment, the level of investment in this type of technology is unclear, and those creating the technology at the moment don't really have the databases to fill them. But there's certainly an early mover advantage for the first to do this. And we can probably expect more of this sort of activity rising higher and higher up the recruitment funnel and becoming more widespread. As a phenomenon, it draws upon two key trends that massively impact our lives, whether we know it or not. First, the use of big data in more and more areas of our lives, and the ability to know more about people. Increasingly, we can draw on a wider range of sources, not only to track down candidates, but to gain deeper insight into their motivations, interests, talents, and the job-seeking journey. Sorry for that word. The second is the increasing importance of reputation as a guarantor of quality, efficiency, and reliability. Which brings us to... That's Richard III, by the way. Looking a bit dodgy. Shouldn't have to explain the picture, should I? We're already really used to the idea of using aggregated data to help us decide other purchases through the use of reviews on TripAdvisor, eBay, Amazon. I stay at an Airbnb during the week when I'm working in Worksop. And in order to see the review that my host has posted about me as a guest, I have to review her too. Both reviews are posted. My thoughts of her as a host and hers of me as a guest. And you can't see one without the other. In the recruitment space, we've seen the rise of Glassdoor, whose growth has outstripped that of LinkedIn in the last 2 years, purely through the power of peer review. And we know the pros and cons of Glassdoor, but there's no doubting the impact it's had. Job boards, who have always shied away from employer review tools for fear of biting the hand that feeds them, are now looking seriously at this, and Monster has recently been the first to take these steps. Businesses now recognise, as they did with social media a few years ago, that they can't simply just ignore bad reviews, but they need to engage with their users. We know that a massive part of this engagement is the scrutiny it places on the candidate process, as this is the first contact anyone has with an employer. We know that a slow recruiter response, lack of useful communication, unnecessary process, and poorly handled declines all risk exposure to scrutiny assessment, which should drive businesses to improve their processes, if only to just gain a competitive edge. However, what is more interesting than this is that we now expect the currency of reputation to permeate down below the top corporate level, down to individuals, and in this context, maybe individual recruiters. In the future, we may have to get used to the idea of personalised, professional, peer-reviewed ratings to become as much part of a recruiter's makeup as their LinkedIn profile. The skill of the recruiter to manage candidates, candidate conversations, and that candidate journey on which the success of a business's stability to hire rests may well become public currency and an asset or a liability for that business's workforce planning. As we see this in the US at the moment for regulated professionals such as lawyers and teachers, where online tools publish peer reviews, meaning reputations can not only affect employment chances, but also earning potential. If this becomes more widespread in the UK and across other professions, including recruitment, it will be an enormous challenge to the industry. Recruiters and recruiting teams may try to fight this, but the evidence shows that once the ideas are out there and the technology exists to support them, resistance may well be futile, which, let's face it, recruitment struggles reputationally a little bit anyway. So as well as the reputation for the hiring process, organisations will now need to consider the reputation of their recruiting teams themselves and the competitive edge this may give their business. The implication for this trend is perhaps towards greater specialisation within the recruitment function, which brings us to recruitment marketing or recruitment plus marketing. If corporate recruitment is being pushed into specialisation by the need to focus on best practice, it is also being pulled into this by the development of recruitment marketing, perhaps as a separate specialism from the recruitment process. Our engagement with prospective employees is becoming more personalised. Technology can deliver personalised application processes. Social tools make reaching out to recruiters and candidates even easier. Might it be that the two halves of recruitment marketing will become more specialised and ultimately split into two disciplines? Will recruiters, mindful of their own reputations and that of their organisations, be forced to focus on the skills of a different part of the recruitment cycle? Similarly, as marketing becomes more and more sophisticated, kicking in earlier in the decision-making process, do we think we are likely to see greater specialist demands upon its practitioners? Instead of the simple binary, passive and active candidates, big data and technology allows us to see candidates and potential candidates as purchasers at different stages of that journey. This is no different from what conventional sales teams have done for years, thinking about leads as cold, warm, or hot. But rather than focusing on the buying end of the process, recruitment marketers are using content and social marketing strategies to drive activity higher up that purchasing funnel into awareness and consideration in order to improve conversion at the bottom. It's no coincidence that on many job boards you put your job in a shopping cart. It's a purchasing experience. The ability to track the impact and effectiveness of this activity has made this process possible, along with our ability to track the audiences through their digital footprint. So far, so ordinary. But this is not a new trend. Something has been happening gradually over many years. But what we are now seeing is recruitment marketers looking to use timed content to stimulate a latent response amongst audience segments to provoke what would be traditionally considered a passive candidate to act. We know about behaviours, events, rites of passage, seasonal events that lead audiences to consider changing jobs, birthdays, return from holidays, passing exams, getting married, getting divorced, redundancy. Indeed, our marketing cycle at Wilko reflects many of these life events. Already we do this in a very crude way through media use. For example, we know that more people apply for jobs on a Monday than at the weekend. But increasingly we can use data generated through Google Analytics and Facebook Audience Insight to understand when audiences go through events that make them more open to recruitment offers and can create content strategies to reflect this. The data that allowed us to see audience behaviour and engage with them on topics that are of interest to them, as opposed to what an organisation might think they need to be told, is really important. It requires a more sophisticated, strategic, and time-consuming approach, which considers recruitment marketing as it's a task in itself, not simply one of the recruiter's jobs. Real care needs to be taken with the way we reach candidates. Not everyone will be happy with what they may see as marketing intrusion. And a lot of candidates will have ad blockers on their systems. But the reward is greater levels of insight, of efficiency, and better match candidates in the hiring process, so that the candidates driven by a specialist marketing function can be passed to specialist recruiters to do what they do best. I don't know. Might this be the way forward? In conclusion, he's a candidate on a journey. It is likely that trends that have driven recruitment marketing activity over the last few years will continue. Digitally driven, data-driven, brand-led activity that's increasingly based on audience-orientated content that engages higher up the conversion funnel, away from traditional advertising-led, active candidate-focused activity. But perhaps we move into the next few years, some of the biggest and maybe unanticipated challenges will come down to the people in this room, the recruiters themselves, and recruitment functions. How businesses use technology, their reputation, data, and how they see that candidate process driving their performance to increase the effectiveness of what they do. Thank you.